Hello. Welcome, everybody. My name is Ron Yaple, and I'm presently the Vice President of the Sheffield Land Trust. And this is our 26th winter lecture. And I want to give a shout out to our staff, one of which is Kathleen Orlando. And I don't think Bob is here, but he is Executive Director of Operations, who does a wonderful job. And we have dozens of volunteers who pitch in with every event, with everything we do to help put things together, to make cookies, to bake, to organize tables and chairs, to order the tent. The list is long. And for a small organization, we get a lot done. So I just want to thank everybody that's involved in the Sheffield Land Trust and those who help, including you all who come to these and donate. On top of this being our 26th winter lecture, it's also the anniversary of our 35th year as an organization. So, hooray! And our latest big project, I think the largest yet, involves about 1,000 acres near and on Cooper Hill here in Sheffield. And an alliance was formed with numerous groups, including Mass Audubon, the Nature Conservancy, the Houstonic Valley Association, the Northwest Connecticut Land Trust, the Salisbury Land Trust Association, and maybe I'm missing one. The trustees of reservations, thank you. The owners of the Bartholomew's Cobble. And last but not least, Pine Island Farm, who has begun the process of securing most of the farmland, 500 acres more or less, on Cooper Hill by taking on the mortgage with the land trust's help, and until we get agricultural preservation restriction funds from the state. So it's an amazing effort that's come together in the last 8 months after the property went up for sale on the market. And as one of our board members said, when we learned, the shoe just dropped. And so we took it on, and thank you all for your help with that. So that's our big project this year, and I think many of you know, there is a trifold brochure here that gives you a way to help the organization, volunteer with the organization, make donations, and to get involved if you're interested. And so that's our latest project. I think you all know the Sheffield Land Trust lands are most of those lands are open to the public. And we have 2 properties with great trail networks. So to learn more, check with any of us as board members. And we have an event coming up on Arbor Day, April 27th. It's a tree and shrub giveaway. So if you want to start with some young seedlings and get them started in your garden and outplant them as they age, from 10 to 1 on April 27th at the Sheffield Library, Bushnell Sage Library across the street. Come and join in the Arbor Day celebration and get some seedlings. And without further ado, let's talk about what we're here for. This is a group panel discussion related to the Community Preservation Act. And I'm just going to read down through the agenda, what the plan is for today, and then turn it over. The Community Preservation Act is a tool for smart growth and economic development that helps communities restore historic sites and buildings like Sheffield's Town Hall and Police Station and create affordable housing, as well as protect open spaces and develop outdoor recreational facilities. We're going to be joined by Chase Mack, who's on Zoom from the Community Preservation Coalition. He'll provide an overview of the Community Preservation Act and how communities have been using it across the state. And then we have Patrick White at the table here. He's from Stockbridge and will speak to Stockbridge's experience. And Rita Furlong from Beckett, who will do the same. And finally, Rene Wood will round it out with providing an update on where we are in Sheffield with the Community Preservation Act. And Sally Underwood-Miller is also here. She has been key in getting Stockbridge involved in the Community Preservation Act. She's the chair of the Stockbridge CPC, and I'm going to let Sally say what that is.
Community Preservation Committee.
Okay. And a longtime member, and she's representing the CONCOM on the Community Preservation Committee. She has served on the Campusa Bog Stewardship Committee, and she's on the Stockbridge Bowl Stewardship Commission, and is a founding member of the Stockbridge Land Trust.
So what we're going to do is while Chase's presentation goes on, we're going to turn the lights out in the audience so people can see the screen better. Everybody on Zoom will stay muted except for Chase.
I'm sorry. This one too?
Kathy, would you like me to introduce the other panel members and their bios?
Yes.
Or do you want to do that individually?
We get started, yeah.
Go ahead. So Patrick White is a member of the Stockbridge Select Board. He also serves on its Community Preservation Committee, its Affordable Housing Trust, and the Governor's new Climate Advisory Board. Rita Furlong is with the Beckett Community Preservation Committee. She's the committee's chair. She also serves on the town's Parks and Recreation Committee as chair and Historical Commission as treasurer. In addition, she's the Ladies Guild president and director of the Mullen House Educational Center, which includes the Beckett Museum and the Beckett Quarry Museum. And Rene Wood is a member of the Sheffield Select Board. She also serves on the town's Conservation Commission as chair and is the recycling coordinator. And speaking to recycling, you'll notice we are serving water to the panelists using our recyclable Dewey Hall mugs. And Rene has also served on the town's planning board and board of health. She's been involved with many community programs, including the Sheffield Fair, and she's finishing up 12 years as select board. So welcome to our panel and to Chase. And I think I just want to wrap it up by saying, is it so that each chair has an index card?
They were given index cards.
Okay. So if you have ideas for how CPA funds might be used, or a complaint about my introduction, any other thoughts related to the Sheffield Land Trust, please feel free to jot them down.
Thank you all for having me at this event. My name is Chase Mack, and I'm the communications director for a nonprofit called Community Preservation Coalition. Sheffield, like about 20 other communities in the state right now, have expressed interest in the possibility of adopting the Community Preservation Act. And our organization helps municipalities understand how the program works, understand how adoption process works. So I will be introducing you to the CPA program so that you'll understand the types of projects we fund and how the town's adopted. A little bit background of our organization. We are a nonprofit that was formed back in 2000 when the CPA law was, created. And we are a coalition of several different nonprofit groups that span the different areas of the CPA program. So we have some land folks like Trust for Public Land, Mass Audubon, and the trustees. Some housing organizations such as MAHA and Yaple, as well as Preservation Massachusetts, representing the historic preservation side. And we also have representatives from CPA communities that serve on our steering committee, as well as several at-large members. So this group collectively represents the leadership and the organization of the coalition, and I am one of 2 staff members that runs the day-to-day operation and helps municipalities with their CPA programs. So I'm going to cover a lot today in a pretty quick amount of time, but if you want to learn more about CPA, I highly encourage you to visit our website. It's at communitypreservation.org, and specifically you'll see a tab in our menu called Adopting CPA, and that has a lot of great information explaining how the CPA program works. So if you do, walk away from today's presentation with a lot of questions, I encourage you to check out this website to learn more, because they have lots of great info there. So, what is the Community Preservation Act, or CPA? CPA is a really unique piece of Massachusetts legislation. There's nothing else like this program anywhere else in the country. And it was signed into law by Governor Cellucci back in 2000, and it has to be adopted by each municipality at the local level. And that's part of why our organization was founded, was that if this had been signed into law and that was that, it may very well have just stayed up on the shelf. And so our organization did a lot of work in those early years, educating folks about how it worked, how they could adopt it. And so, municipalities adopt it at the local level. And what it allows municipalities to do is to create a local restricted funding source for the purposes of historic preservation, open space, outdoor recreation, and community housing. These are quality of life issues. These are community character type projects that often struggle to find funding year to year in a regular municipal budget. And so CPA allows cities and towns to make really crucial investments into these quality of life areas that really struggle to find funding on a regular basis. And so since 2000, how has this program gone? It's been phenomenally successful. Today, there are a total of 196 cities and towns that have adopted CPA. That's 55% of the municipalities in the state, but over 70% of Massachusetts residents now live in the CPA community. Additionally, we have not had a single community revoke the program once it's been adopted. That is certainly an option, but once folks have CPA, we find they're very reluctant to let it go. So it's been a very successful program. Here's a map that shows you in green all of the towns that have adopted CPA, and in orange all of the cities that have adopted CPA statewide. And so every few years we're adding more communities lit up on this map. And Sheffield may very well be another one. I won't go over all of these statistics, but this gives you an idea of just statewide the impact that CPA has had over the last 24 years. There have been over 16,000 projects that have been funded through these local CPA programs, and it has raised over $3.4 billion, billion with a B. It has grown to be a really huge investment program for municipalities that adopt into it. And you can see these stats across the other project categories that it's been doing all kinds of amazing work all over the state. So we're going to talk about the basics, how to adopt, what the projects look like. But the basic way that this program works is there are 2 funding components. The first is a local surcharge on property tax bills. And that's where the majority of the revenue gets created in each of these municipalities. They vote to adopt a local CPA surcharge on your property tax bill. and that can be up to a 3% surcharge. And that is not a 3% increase on property taxes. That is kind of a misunderstanding of how it works, but we'll explain a little bit more what that surcharge looks like. But if that was the only component of the funding, it probably CPA would have never taken off. But there is also a state funding component where there is a statewide CPA trust fund. Where every year in November, the Department of Revenue distributes the funding that's in that trust fund to CPA communities, and that supplements the revenue that's collected at the local level. And each of these communities is deciding individually what level of surcharge they want to take on and the different exemptions that are available. So that surcharge level, I know there's been a little discussion from what I understand with the Sheffield folks, but a little bit of an explanation. The maximum is 3%, but there were many communities that adopted at that maximum level for the kind of most bang for your buck in the early years of CPA. But we've seen that this high surcharge level can be really, really, really tough nowadays. I think in the last 10 or 12 years, we've only had 2 communities adopt at that full 3%. It just becomes very expensive for the residents. So the most success we've seen in the last decade or so is about a 1% or a 1.5%. And that seems to be the sweet spot where you're raising enough revenue to do some really amazing projects, but the cost isn't impacting the taxpayers quite so hard as a full 3%. And we tell folks the sweet spot that you're aiming for an average homeowner cost per year is about $50. And so I have some figures that I can show that what it might look like in Sheffield. But before we get to that, there are several exemptions that communities can adopt. And we recommend the basic ones to almost every community nowadays. You can exempt the first $100,000 of residential property value when you're calculating that surcharge level. $100,000 gets taken off right away off of that calculation. You can do the same exemption for commercial and business property. You can also fully exempt low-income families or low to moderate-income seniors. Now, that isn't automatically applied like the first 2 exemptions. It's through an application, but this is one that we recommend to every community because it gives the folks that need a break, that need those funds crucially, they can be completely exempt from the CPA surcharge. They don't have to pay into it. There is also a full commercial exemption available, but it's only for communities with a split tax rate. And I think we only have 1 community in the state that's adopted it. So that one's pretty rare. This looks a little complicated, and I think your local campaign folks in Sheffield are going to have some figures. But this is a breakdown of how that CPA surcharge amount gets calculated. So I've actually kind of come up with a scenario here. This figure for the home value is the average single-family home value in Sheffield, about $450,000. This is a scenario where if Sheffield had a 1% CPA surcharge and the exemptions that I just explained, it would take that $349,000 evaluation, apply your municipal tax rate, which is 11.75%, and so the amount that would be subject to your CPA surcharge would be about $4,102. You have a 1% CPA surcharge. 1% of that value is $41. So in this scenario, the average homeowner in Sheffield would pay approximately $41 a year into your local CPA fund. And I think some folks are going to have some estimates on what they expect the total revenue to look like, but that gives you a breakdown of what the residents are paying into their local CPA fund. And then the other component, the statewide CPA trust fund, the way that works is, as I mentioned, the Department of Revenue distributes all of the revenue from the CPA trust fund out to CPA communities. You have to adopt CPA to be eligible for this distribution. And the revenue for the trust fund comes from a completely different source. It's not from these local surcharge applications. Anytime that anyone files any kind of paperwork at any of the registries of deeds across the state, you will see a CPA fee applied to that form when you check out at the registry. So mortgages, deeds, lien certificates, any kind of paperwork at the registry, there's a CPA fee applied when you check out, and all of that revenue goes to the CPA trust fund, which is then distributed to CPA communities once a year. So to give you an idea of how impactful that is, the amount of funding in the trust fund definitely fluctuates. It depends on a lot of factors, real estate market, those transactions at the registries. But last November, every CPA community in the state received 21% of what they raised at the local level. So if a town raised $100,000 from that local surcharge, the state provided an additional $21,000 in matching funds to that community. And that level has fluctuated over the years. Sometimes it's quite a bit higher. A couple of years ago, we were hovering around a 40% match. It dipped down for a few years, but our organization worked to adjust the fees of the registries to create more revenue. But this gives you an idea of why these communities are willing to make these local investments, is that the state has these additional funds that are a big encouragement for making this kind of an investment. So the question is, how does a community adopt CPA? And step one is you have to find a way to put CPA on a ballot initiative. CPA has to be passed at a local ballot election. And the way that you put CPA adoption on the ballot, you have two options. First is through your legislative body. So either a town meeting or your city council. So town meeting, you would put a CPA adoption proposal on your town meeting warrant. Town meeting would weigh in, decide, do we want to put this on the ballot, yes or no? If town meeting votes to approve it, it advances to the ballot. Alternatively, about a third of the communities in the state that have adopted CPA have done so by collecting signatures on a ballot question petition. So that requires advocates to go out and collect signatures from 5% of registered voters. They submit that ballot question petition to the state with the signatures. That also places CPA on the ballot. And then once it's on the ballot, all it needs is a majority to vote yes. If the majority of voters say yes, we want to adopt CPA, it'll appear as a ballot question. Whatever, after the state ones, 1, 2, 3, 4, however many there are, you would see CPA as the last one with your proposal for your town. And if the majority of folks vote yes, you've adopted CPA. So once you adopt CPA, how do these great projects happen? The first step is that every municipality that has the CPA program establishes a local community preservation committee. Several members of those committee members are there with you today, from what I've heard. So they'll be able to talk to you about what these committees do to make CPA happen. But all of these committees in every town, they have to have 5 required members, which you can see the list there. That's really just making sure there's representation and expertise across the different areas, categories of CPA. But it also allows up to 4 at-large members, and those can be totally customized. Some towns opt to have an open space committee added as a seat. Other towns have them just citizens or citizens with certain interests. There's even 1 or 2 towns that have those positions as elected positions. People run to be on their local CPC. And the role of these CPCs, the Community Preservation Committee, is they are charged with really taking a look at the needs and the wants of the communities across these categories that CPA can fund. They put together a CPA plan. They talk to the other boards and committees in towns about what kind of work needs to be done, what can we do with this program. They get input from the public as well. They're required to have a public hearing every year where they take feedback from residents about what types of projects folks want to see in their community. They create an application process. They take in project proposals and review them for eligibility and how it fits within your local CPA plan. But it is not the committee that ultimately decides how these projects are funded. This is another real magic part of what CPA, what makes this CPA program work so well is that every single project to receive CPA funding has to receive approval from your town meeting. The Community Preservation Committee is doing a lot of legwork, taking in the applications and making recommendations for funding to your town meeting. And then it is the town meeting voters that decide, do we want to fund this project or not? And here's just a flow chart of exactly what I described. You know, project proponents submit an application to the CPC, they review it, they make their recommendations to your town meeting, and your town meeting votes on which ones they want to approve. There are some rules, even though you'll notice there's no state level agency that's kind of dictating how these CPA programs run. It is the state considers CPA a local program for all the communities that adopt it. And that's really what makes it special, is that it is very locally controlled. It's the residents that are really weighing in on the priorities. So the few rules there are in the CPA legislation is that each of the main categories, housing, open space and rec, and historic, are required to communities either have to spend or save 10% of their total revenue each year into each of those categories, so that each of the main categories is at least getting a part of the fund. The other 70%, totally flexible. It can be changed year to year depending on what project applications come in. It can be focused as a priority on a specific category. We have some communities that, decide we want this as an open space program. We're going to try to devote 40% to open space every year. We have some communities that treat it as a housing program. They say, we're all in on housing. We're going to dedicate 70, 80% of the funding to housing every year. And then communities can also save up to 5% of that revenue for administrative costs. And that's mainly to allow your local committee to do its work. So, administrative costs there. This is maybe one of the most important parts of CPA. It's called the allowable uses chart. You can find this on our website if you want to dig into this. But this is a visual representation of the do's and don'ts, what is allowed according to the CPA legislation. So you'll see verbs along the left side, categories across the top, and you'll see there's more yeses than there are no's, but there are certain rules around what you can and cannot use CPA funds for. But as you'll see, it's got a lot of flexibility. There are a lot of great initiatives you can do, and I'll rattle off a bunch of those when we get to the end of this PowerPoint to give you some examples of the types of projects that happen. So this is an important question that comes up from new communities that are looking into CPA. They want to know, can we ever revoke CPA if we want to? And the answer is yes, but CPA was designed as an investment tool, a long-term investment tool. So communities that do adopt it are required to keep it for at least 5 years before they can revoke. At any point after that 5-year mark, the community can revoke CPA, going through the same process as adoption. So a town meeting vote to advance it to the ballot. If the revocation question passes the ballot, the community revokes their CPA program. And as I mentioned before, we have never had a community vote to revoke CPA. Everybody that's adopted this program has decided they wanted to keep it. Now, that's not to say you can't also change your program. You can adjust that surcharge level. You can change the exemptions that you've adopted. And again, it's through that same process of a town meeting vote or the ballot question petition, and then advancing to a local ballot and passing at the ballot election. That can be done at any time. You don't have to wait 5 years to adjust that. If you adopt CPA with 1%, the town says, we love this, we want to triple the investment in, the voters are behind it, you can raise it to that full 3% level down the road through the process I explained. So that is a quick review of how the program works, where the funding comes from, how you adopt it. And here I'm going to rattle through some slides that give you some examples of the types of projects that CPA communities are doing every single year. So under the historic preservation category, a very popular use is the restoration of historic municipal buildings. Town halls, town libraries, we see this all the time. This is, you can use CPA funds to restore or rehabilitate, preserve these historic buildings because many of them take a prominent place in the kind of what folks think of when they think about their community. So nearly every municipality in Massachusetts has buildings like these. CPA helps to protect a lot of them. You can also do adaptive reuse projects, which means taking in a historic building that might be an old town library that's been defunct for years. You could use CPA funds to restore that old town library into a community center, or an old school that is, an old historic building converted into affordable housing units. That can all be done with CPA. You can also provide CPA funds to nonprofits that have local historic buildings or properties. Usually this is done through preservation easement. It's making sure that that investment is protected through a preservation restriction on the building, something like that. You can protect historic documents. We have had this, old hundreds and hundreds of year-old documents that are integral to the, establishment of the town. You can protect those with CPA funds. In the land, the open space side of things, you can preserve agricultural land, which is very popular in a lot of the more rural towns. You can protect vulnerable conservation spaces. You can protect drinking water supplies. And while there was a lot of work in that open space category in the first 10 years of the program, the star of the show these days, after a change to the law that opened up outdoor recreation, this is a very popular category of CPA funds. So it includes playgrounds, where you can create new playgrounds, you can rehabilitate existing ones, athletic fields for baseball, soccer, basketball courts, all this, tennis courts. Pickleball is hugely popular. I know a lot of folks are in love with pickleball. That's become very popular for a CPA project. Biking trails, rail trails, obviously parks of various sizes. I believe the one in the bottom right is a pocket park. What you see there is the entirety of the park, but CPA help create those. It can do skate parks, any kind of outdoor recreation space. Community gardens is also an incredibly popular use, allowing residents to have that outdoor space that they can utilize and connect to the land. And then affordable housing. Though when it comes to CPA, we usually describe it as community housing, because most of the time when you hear about other grant programs or other things that promote or fund affordable housing, that's usually referring to what's considered low-income housing, which that is defined as 80% of area-wide median income. CPA is actually a little more flexible than that. CPA can fund up to what is called moderate income housing, which is defined as 100% of area-wide median income. So that would be housing that is restricted to those income levels, and I have told what those levels are, what they look like in Sheffield. So it would be about $71,000 for one person, $101,000 for a family of four. That is the cap for the level of affordable housing that CPA can fund to create in your town. That can include housing for veterans, housing for seniors. Like I brought up with the historic preservation category, adaptive reuse, taking a historic building that's been in disrepair, disuse, and converting it into affordable housing units. It can also meet specialized needs within the community. One great example that I love to give is that on Cape Cod, there are about 7 or 8 CPA towns that recognized there was a need for housing for folks with autism. And they actually all banded together. They all provided CPA funds for a regional housing project that provides housing for folks with autism. And you can collaborate with other CPA communities on regional needs. It can be kind of tough, and not every community wants to do stuff like that, but it's totally possible. And you can also partner with nonprofits such as Habitat for Humanity that can utilize CPA funds to create housing units in your community. And that's it. That is my what I call my CPA crash course. Gives you the basics. There are a lot of moving pieces to CPA, a lot of nuts and bolts, and I am glad that you have the expertise from some folks from some neighboring CPA communities, because they'll be able to tell you at the local level their experiences with CPA. But I hope you have found this informative and interesting. And if you do want to learn more about how CPA works, again, I encourage you to visit our website at communitypreservation.org.
We're going to start with Sally.
Okay, hi, I'm Sally Underwood-Miller. I am the current chair of the Community Preservation Commission in Stockbridge. I have been involved since the very beginning, which Stockbridge adopted the CPC in 2002, so it's been a long time. And Tom Stokes tapped me on the shoulder and said, I think we should do this. And so we got together a group, and as it stands now, Linda Jackson and I are the two last women standing on this committee. We've been on ever since. But at the time, my children were coming into their 20s, and I was looking at where my children were going to live when they finished with college and decided to go off into the world. And Stockbridge was not affordable. And that was one of the things that appealed to me the most about the community preservation program, was that my children might be able to live in Stockbridge if they chose to do so. So I created this spreadsheet of what the average person who worked in town, in the museum or the library or as a teacher, and what that might look like. And at the time it was $35,000, and that was a pretty good salary at that time. And I started going through and figuring out what would it cost for housing, what would it cost for their insurance, what would it cost for food, what would it cost for the very basic expenses that person would incur. And this is not, everybody thinks, oh gosh, affordable housing, these are the dregs of humanity. It's not. That's not what it's about. It's about your average citizen trying to live in a town, in Stockbridge in particular, where there's a lot of money coming in, and a lot of the houses are being purchased by people with many means, and the folks who are the backbone of the town can no longer afford to live there. So that $35,000 was gone in a heartbeat. And it resonated with people in the town that this new program that was coming from the state could be something that would help our children stay in our community, that it would help bring young families into town. Every year at town meeting, I worry because as I'm sure, I'm not sure, but as I imagine in Sheffield, you're seeing those families going elsewhere and the population of the children and people with children going down. We have 100 kids in our school system, and we have this enormous school that we have to support. It just doesn't make sense. And of course, the other thing was to preserve our open space and our really valuable historic buildings that make Stockbridge the iconic town that it is. We have the fortune, or maybe misfortune, I'm not really sure, of having our main street being preserved by Norman Rockwell forever. And that Stockbridge has managed to preserve that look and preserve that feeling, and to a great degree with the help of the Community Preservation Act. This year we had requests for $1.8 million from our community. This was it across the board. It was open space, it was affordable housing, and it was historic preservation. As you can imagine, historic preservation was the bulk of it. And I'm sure that looking down the main street of Sheffield, that you have those same kinds of pressures on your town. It's been our policy to, when we get a request for an historic preservation project, if they come in and they have, let's say, a slate roof on the house, on the building, and they want that slate roof, they want to replace that slate roof. We ask them, okay, so give us a quote. What would it cost if you went to Home Depot and you got a regular old asphalt roof? And then what does it cost to do the slate roof? And of course, there's a large gap between those things. But we want that slate roof to remain in Stockbridge. We want that building to look like it did when it was built. But it's prohibitive for a lot of organizations to be able to maintain that kind of thing. So we ask them for the difference. And we will, to the best of our ability, fund the difference between what would be a regular replacement using common everyday materials and what would be the replacement cost if they went back to the correct historic materials. So that's kind of what we've done. Kathy asked about what is it like to get people to serve on the CPA. As Chase mentioned, you have required people from the various committees in town, the Conservation Commission, the Historic Preservation, Parks and Rec, Finance Committee, and then there's one other, Assessor's Office. Okay. And then the selectmen in Stockbridge appoint two members, and then there are two others. So we have the various commissions will appoint a person. They'll go in. You'll come to the end of the year and say, okay, who wants to serve on CPC? And we've had a remarkably wonderful group that have come together. We have had very few controversies. We've been lucky enough to work together as a committee, and even though sometimes we have small differences of opinion, we've generally come together in the end. And we've been very fortunate that in the 20 some odd years that we've had the community preservation recommendations to town hall, that I think only once did we ever have anyone question one of the projects, which was an historic preservation project. And every other year it's just been spend the money, spend the money, spend the money. Because they realize that the fabric of our town would be very different if we couldn't maintain what we've got. They realize that we're looking forward to how to preserve those open spaces that are so important and to try and create housing for the next generation. And that's all I have to say.
All right, my name is Patrick White. I'm on the Stockbridge Select Board, and I'm gonna kind of do a little bit on the financial side of some of these things. But before I do that, I want to thank Ron, and I especially want to thank Rene. I worked with select folks, people, whatever, around this entire county, and I have to say that Rene Wood, both as the chair and as a Sheffield, I have never seen a harder working select person in this entire county, and you've had a great one, and I just want to thank her for her hard work. All right. None of us like to pay taxes. All right? It's true. All right? So the first thing I'm just going to tell you is that when taxes are tied to other money, it's pretty nice. So in the case last year of Stockbridge, we got almost $1 for every dollar the CPC cost us coming from the state. All right. Now, some would argue that that's kind of our taxes too, but if you don't get it coming here, it's going to go to other communities. So right off the bat, it's a really good deal for taxes because, the money goes further, because this is a municipal building we're in, right? No, okay. But you got some. Oh, sorry. You got some municipal buildings that are historic owned by the town, and obviously it costs money to maintain those. You have open space challenges. So the first thing I'm the CFO of a nonprofit in Stockbridge that just bought Old Town Hall, that big white iconic building on Main Street. All right, that's an $8 million renovation. Now CPC, because we had multiple years grants, is only going to pay for a couple of percentage points of that renovation. But when we went to a private donor and got a $5 million donation, that helped give it credibility. And when we go to someone like National Treasures, grant-making organizations, the CPC gives it credibility. So it's like that seed money from both private donors and grant makers and individual donors that is going to really help to preserve land. I'll also just point out on the question of this great job you're doing down here on land preservation, how important that is right now for viewscapes. Look, I'm a firm believer that we have to attack climate change, of course, but the governor's plan calls for a gigawatt of new solar production a year. That takes 5,000 acres of solar farms per gigawatt. For the next 27 years, that's what the plan is. And right now at the State House, there is a plan to take away all local control over that siting and zoning, and that's going to pass. All right. And it becomes that much more important what these guys are doing to protect your especially important viewscapes and land with conservation restrictions around farming and around preservation, because right now this is the time to conserve land. And so I feel like, and one other point I'll make is on housing. Your affordable housing trust that I know that you're establishing can actually go up to 110%. CPC can go up to 100%. That basically that for home ownership, like the Habitat for Humanity model, that puts it up in the $110,000 range. Now, 110 grand is. It's funny that land is getting so expensive in the Berkshires that you can make $100,000 a year and still qualify for maybe a little down payment assistance from a CPC or from a affordable housing trust. But the fact is that, in Stockbridge, the average house price is selling for $750,000, and $100,000 salary, which might be an EMT and a teacher's aide or something like that together, isn't enough to buy a house in my town anymore. So, so as you look at that kind of missing middle housing, CPC can play a really important role. And even if you can help just one or two young families buy a house a year, over 20 years, that's 40 families, and it stays on the rolls. So, for a first-time home buyer, sure, they can only make 5 or 10% when they sell it, but when they're looking to trade up, they've gotten good credit and all those other things that helps them buy their next house as they're making more money later in their career. So I think there's a ton of really great reasons to do this, and I would just one last thing, this is just my personal opinion, is do the exemptions and go for the higher percentage. The great thing about CPC is it's a progressive tax. If my house is worth 200 grand, I'm going to pay a lot less if my house is worth 2 million. With the presumption that if you have a $2 million house, maybe you're a little bit better off than the person with a $200,000 house. That's not always true, but it's usually true. So, so think about doing the exemptions for the modest income homeowners and the seniors. And then, the higher percentage basically is really a progressive tax. The more you put it at $5 million house, you're going to pay a lot more than for someone with a $250,000, small, modest ranch. Anyway, that's what I have to say. Thank you.
How about
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of clarify what Patrick said. When it goes to town meeting and it passes, you have just told anybody who might also be giving a grant or thinking about helping to fund that the town is behind this project. Yeah. It's really, really important to people who want to give money for other projects.
That's what I meant to say. Thanks.
Great. Well, you've heard all the details of how it works. I want to share with you some of the things that Beckett has done. Beckett is a rural community. We don't save a lot of flatlands. We don't have any of that in Beckett. But we've done some marvelous, marvelous things with it. And I want to share with you what those projects were, because otherwise voters would have questioned maybe doing some of these things. But the fact that this money is sort of like in a savings account. It's already there. You've already paid it. It's cash available to do the projects with. And that makes all the difference in the world when it comes to voting at the ATM. The money's there. They're not going to be taxed further for it. So we put up a Civil War monument. We built a pavilion at the North Beckett Village Park. We put in a $70,000 playground at the Beckett Center Park. We've paid for weed pulling at Center Pond. We've saved the Beckett Arts Center. They've done insulation and engineering to prevent problems that are going on. The Beckett Athenaeum has been insulated and had special shades for the windows, again, to save energy. We have had Construct. You've probably heard of Construct, who will come into a town and do that. We've sponsored 2 projects. They ask for $25,000. They'll take a home that's in not very good shape, is available on the market. They will take ownership of it, and we contribute $25,000 towards the improvement of that building. And we've done that 2 years in a row now. So that's a great way to take some poor building that needs some loving. And we have groups out there that are willing to do that. The Habitat for Humanity also does that. We've built a beach shed at our beach for the lifeguard equipment and things like that. So it's a lovely, safe building now to house that material. Esau's Trail is our newest trail that we've put money into to develop one of the flatlands in Beckett for people to walk that are elderly or to take their dog. So we have the Appalachian Trail and we have the quarry trails, but they're for climbers. They're not for people who need a more moderate mode of moving. One of the profound things that we've done is we're fortunate enough to have a Paul Revere bell in the Congregational Church. The money cannot go to support a church program, but it can go to save that tower. Those powder post beetles did a job on it after 200 years. And so it has been renovated. A new model of it was built. The bell was put back in. $100,000 that the church never would have been able to come up with. So it made the difference. And the whole town is proud of that building and proud of the fact that that bell is there. And so they take the money out of the fund that's already sitting there, and you do these projects. At the present time, we're working on the Beckett School had a cupola that was on the original Beckett School, a beautiful copper dome. Beckett School has been renovated twice. That thing just sat there. They used it once, but then it was put in storage. But the bell is, the copper top on it is gorgeous. And so we're in present having a reconstructed model of that original tower built to put the thing back on and to put it on the town hall. Beckett Town Hall looks very much like a motel. It's new. So maybe this will give it a little bit of class, but it's historic. The actual cupola, the actual copper tower is real and original, over 100 years old. So we're doing all kinds of wonderful projects that make the difference. I have to tell you, our only reluctance in 2008 when we began was the assessors. It was a lot of work for the assessors, but now there are programs that have been designed to help the assessors because they went nuts the first year or two. It's a lot of work. Beckett has a lot of individual property owners because even though we have a population of only 1,700, we have 10,000 people in the summer because of all the lakes and cottages. So it was overwhelming for the assessors in the beginning. They now have a handle on it and they don't whine nearly as much. And so I think I'd like to just say to you that I agree, go for the 3% if you can. We have only a 1.5%, but look at the things we've done with it that are just marvelous. And we have income people of we have $1 million homes in the woods, and we have Sherwood Forest area, which is a more moderate, comfortable living community. So we have everything from A to Z. People do not complain about it. Some people only pay $5 or $10 on their tax bill. Others pay more if they have that $1 million home in the woods. So it's a wonderful program. We've had it for long enough now to know that it's been worth every bit of sweat and equity that we've put into it.
So I'm going to try to wrap this up. And first of all, I want to thank the Sheffield Land Trust. I really appreciate this being the topic of your winter lecture, and also our panelists. I think between the three of them, they've covered really all the bases, how it works, the money side of it, which I'm always interested in, and also specific projects. I also want to thank you for being here because I think you are going to be the ambassadors going forward, that if you believe in this project, you're going to have to get the people out at our May 6th annual town meeting to vote it yes, so that it can go on the November ballot, so that everyone who votes in November, and we'll expect a huge turnout with the presidential election, this truly can be decided by the town. For my part, I could spend every piece of money we could raise in this, between the parks, our land, buildings, our historic buildings that are not municipal properties. There's a lot of money that's required to keep Sheffield Sheffield. I just want to call your attention to the $250,000 that you all spent in taxes last year to repair the police station. That could have come out of this money. The thing that and I'm speaking for myself as a selectman, I'm not speaking for the entire board, but I really do thank the board after many delays deciding that the voters had the right to decide on this. What we have done in structuring this is ask for a very moderate 1%. I think that is because, at least I believe, that pigs get fed and hogs get slaughtered. And I'd rather get this on the books and possibly raise the percentage later. I'd love 3%, but that's not everybody's cup of tea. I want this to pass. I think you want it to pass. What we have also done is taken all the exemptions that are possible in structuring this CPA. That means that if it passes, everyone, both residential, commercial, industrial property as allowed by law, will get a $100,000 exemption right off the top of your assessed property value. We also have adopted the low income and the low to moderate income senior exemption. If you take a look at the handout I prepared for you and read it carefully, which I don't expect you to do now, the one side really talks about these exemptions. I think all of us are very concerned about our families who are struggling, as well as our seniors. And you can be very house rich and money poor. And so this is based on income. I believe the select board feels that our most vulnerable residents will be exempted from any further taxation with these adoptions. The back side of it basically goes through and takes examples of property values, assessed property values from $200,000 up to $1 million, and there's a formula you can use if your house is assessed at more than $1 million. It takes off the $100,000 exemption and then shows you what 1% would cost on this year's, the 23 tax basis. And before the May town meeting, we will have from Chase and his colleagues the exact 24 tax exemptions and how it plays out. We won't have that until probably another month or so. I also want to let you know that our software here in town has a module for our town assessor. Because this act is so popular, so she and her staff will not have to go through what Beckett went through. The other thing that I just wanted to let you know is that as our colleagues were talking about the projects they've done in Stockbridge and in Beckett, every project that is recommended to use CPA funds, and funds can be accrued, so there's enough money to really actually do something with, like produce a housing unit or buy that $75,000 worth of new playground equipment, which I would love to do. It all has to be approved by town voters at a town meeting. So even though they're out there and people are making requests for money, it has to be in the end approved by town voters. If it's not approved, it doesn't go forward and back to the drawing board. I think the only thing that I want to add is pick up on Patrick's comment. During my 12 years as a select board, one of my goals has been to increase money to Sheffield besides through taxpayers. We've been able to do that by adopting the room tax and adopting the meal tax. We've raised as a town almost $500,000 since 2020, and I'm not sure that any of us have felt any pain. I've also, as most of you know, tried to get as many grants as I can, because somebody's going to get that money, and it might as well be us. And when I look at the CPA, I look at the return on investment. It has ranged, I'm not even going to talk about the 100%, that was the early time, but it has ranged from a low of 17% to this year I think was 20-some percent. There is no way that the town has any other source of investment. We're paying for this every time there's a real estate transaction. We need to get our fair share. And every top dollar that we put in, we will get something for that. It's not compound interest, but it's just as good. If I could get 17% on my investments, or 20%, or 43%, as it was in a recent year, I'd do it. That protects you from having to pay more, and that protects our most vulnerable residents. So I hope that you will support this. I'm going to try and get the CTSB recording of this, which is always available at their website on demand. Get it in the library so you can watch this again. We'll have a couple of more programs before it's the May town meeting, but I really hope you'll support this. I truly think this is an incredible investment for Sheffield to make at this time. Thank you.
So we're going to open this up to questions. And Chase, if you're answering a question, I will bring the microphone back over to the owl. But if people want to raise their hands and ask your questions, if we can't hear you, yes, if we can't hear you, we'll try and bring over a microphone or ask you to come up.
My question is related to the 1%. If we're at town meeting and there's a sense that there's a general favoritism for passing this, is there a mechanism that we could utilize that would allow that 1% to go to 3%? Would a motion do that, or is the warrant fixed?
As with every warrant article at a town meeting, it is subject to amendment. The moderator directs that. And as we all know, Julie Hannum is running for moderator. And let's hear it for Julie. And I hope that the town meeting will again elect her to handle our town meeting in May, as she probably won't be elected until the following week. So, but any amendment, any warrant article can be amended. I just really want to caution you that we can all feel, some of us in this room may be better off than others in our town. Sometimes when we ask for too much, we don't get it. It can be defeated, and then there's no going back. And this has been a long time in coming. I will tell you, it has taken over a decade to get the select board to agree to put this on a warrant article. So I just caution enthusiasm. It might be better to go for the 1% and get the foot in the door and see how it goes. And then if in a year or two, because this wouldn't start, I always get confused with fiscal years after all these years. It wouldn't start being collected until another year, I think fiscal year 26, if I'm right, which is another fiscal year off of the one we're about to go into, July 1. So I would love 2%. I would love 3%, but I'm not sure that that is necessarily what we should do at town meeting. I would suggest we pass it and then get it passed in November, because there will be a lot more people looking at it in November. We'll have the presidential election. I expect huge numbers. If it doesn't pass then again, it's going to be very hard to resurrect this. So I'd urge patience.
Can I just revise my comments? Based on Renee's analysis of the situation here, I completely agree with her on her strategy. Thank you.
We took.
So I have two questions actually, but one at a time. I'm noting that all tax exemptions in place, senior work off, veterans, blind, et cetera, are taken before CPA. How about the tax exemptions related to agriculture like Chapter 61A and B? Would that also come off?
My understanding, and Chase, are you still here? I've been told, Chase, is it not true that all of the exemptions, like the senior work-off program and the veteran, I do not know about Chapter 61, okay, that really classifies land into a different category for taxation, okay? It's not a taxation taken off your assessed property value. So, Chase, could you answer that?
Yeah, I believe that there's already exemptions in place that would apply to folks. It goes for the same for the CPA.
Yeah, so Patrick, you're saying? Okay, so Patrick is saying yes.
Okay, thank you. And my second question, and I think, Rene, you alluded to this. I was jotting this down when Chase was talking about the match. And this comes through the state from the Registry of Deeds. So if a house is sold in Sheffield, is that CPA surcharge in Sheffield, or is it only taken on towns that have already adopted CPA? Everybody. So we're paying in right now and we get zero. That's what I wanted to clarify. Thank you. That's an important piece. Thank you.
Yes. 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 So that is, for anybody who couldn't hear, that is yes. Every surcharge on property purchases in Sheffield has for the last 20 years been going in, and none of that has been coming back to Sheffield. All right.
I have a quick question. As I drive around Sheffield, I see numbers of houses that seem to be abandoned. And I always wonder to myself, do those, if taxes haven't been paid on them and the owners are long gone for whatever reason, do those houses kind of revert back to either the state or the town? And second of all, would they be possibilities to rehab? Some of them are larger, and I could see them subdivided into 3 or 4 units for families. And I always think, why aren't we doing something about these existing structures?
It's a very complicated process, but we do have a lot of properties that look abandoned and are falling apart, etc. They continue to be taxed at their assessed value, and when they don't pay, they get to accrue a 14% interest as stated by state law. Now, we do have a housing commission, and eventually I know the Housing Commission is looking at some of these properties that appear to be abandoned. There is an AG program to take them over, etc., but we're not going to get into that. The other thing is that our assessor, our tax collector, Monique Blair and Shauna have done a great job of getting people to become current on their taxes. Those taxes have to be paid off first when the property is sold, so it's not like they go away. But they have done a great job of collecting back due taxes and trying to keep them present. And those properties can go under tax taking and eventually be auctioned off. But it's a long process. I just want to let you know that I feel very comfortable that our treasurer tax collector's office is doing an excellent job of trying to clarify and collect on these unpaid tax bills, and our Housing Commission, as I understand it, will be very shortly presenting a housing plan to the Select Board, which will be subject to discussion with the town. Does that answer your question?
Well, can I ask Chase to add to that? Because you had said in your presentation that adaptive reuse of buildings is something that is very much part of what the CPA is, and I see a lot of our panelists shaking their heads. So if part of your question is, could CPA funds be used to help with adaptive reuse of those buildings to housing? If the panelists could address that.
Can I just add to that? For individual homeowners, also, I might suggest that CPA is maybe not as good a fit as you guys have done a great job applying for community development block grants. I know you've been in that for years, and that's in Massachusetts. There's an anti-aid amendment, which means it's really hard for government to give you money for like food or individual things. It's against the law for your government to generally aid you. But the community development block grant program is state funded with federal dollars, and it actually allows Sheffield to pay to fix a roof or to paint the house or to do some maintenance. It's income level restricted. So you have to be either relatively low income or modest mean homeowner. But it's a great program, and we frankly in our towns don't get enough applicants for that. We have sometimes, not always, but sometimes we have more money in these programs than we have applicants. So if you know people with a rundown house, get them to ask at town hall about the community development block grant program.
Beckett has just applied for $1 million one along with Dalton, and Beckett will get the larger share of that because we will be the host community. We've already got 47 families who have asked for that money to possibly get something to fix septic systems or wells or roofs. So it's a marvelous program, and we've had it twice.
I think we're now on our 5th community development block grant solely for housing rehab. It is frankly the only thing that we have done regarding affordable housing in this town, which is a real shame. And that our latest grant is close to $1 million. It is now open for people to apply for, and I think we are going to have under that something like 13 of the amount of money you can apply for per application has gone up to $50,000 from $40,000 and $35,000. So if you have any questions, let me know and I can direct you to the right place. But we have no money set aside in this town for affordable housing. And if we're going to start walking this walk, instead of just talking about it, the CPA does provide us an excellent opportunity. We are to the point on our affordable housing that basically we don't even qualify for state grants at this point because we're so far behind. But we will get there. It's going to be one of my new focuses when I'm off the board, and hopefully I can make a difference in that. But this money could make a difference if it was adopted and start to bring in, I'm one of the older people in this room, but none of us are very young. We need to get some new families in here with some kids, or our town is going to slowly die. So we do have to start planning for affordable housing and workforce housing, and this could be a major source of money for that.
So I think the answer to that question is yes. The Community Preservation Act funds could be used to help housing organizations and the town to be able to adaptively reuse some of those buildings.
Can I just add one thing to that, too? 2 years ago, I got a call from somebody who had raised their family in Stockbridge, and his house was currently probably worth $800,000, and all his kids were out. He was in his 70s, and he offered to sell it to the town for $400,000 because he wanted another family to have that experience of growing up like we did in a hometown like this to raise their family there. And don't underestimate that those people are out there. And it seems to me that there's a lot of ways. Sometimes people might leave it in their will, or other ways. And another thing you can do is, like, when you combine a down payment assistance either through CPC or a local bank with a community block grant to maybe do a quick renovation with generosity of private donors like that. There's a lot of creative ways to move the needle on keeping families in these towns. And that was my actual experience with this one house. So I just want to kind of encourage everyone to think creatively. It's often looking for multiple sources and opportunities, and CPC is one part of that puzzle, but it's not the only part of the puzzle. And I just, there's a lot of generous souls out there, hit them up.
And you might approach organizations like Construct. Hey, we've got this building. Can you come and look at it? And if they're willing to invest their time and any energy, and CPA can be voted, like I said, we've done 2. Just donating $25,000 is all for them to encourage them to build up the house, and it's worked. It's great.
Oh, we've got some questions over there. I'm not sure if the microphone's going to get all the way there. You may have to come up a little bit.
This is my first meeting. I live in Ashley Falls. My name is Lisa Gustin, and I think my jaw just dropped when you told me the 10 years. I'm mortified that this has been here for 10 years and we haven't. You said for 10 years. No, I'm trying to be part of the solution. I live in Ashley Falls, and I feel like I'm going to a 40th birthday like every week, and I'm 60. And their kids are in my house. Sometimes parents will come clean my house because, I mean, I'm a widow, I have a dog, but I'm just saying when the kids come in, they think it's a playhouse, And I'm so happy. I feel that, and I'm sitting in front of this beautiful pregnant woman behind me that inspired me to get up, because I love these kids. I'm the auntie. But one of the things, I'm just looking at the little cartoon that he put up, and it had the ballot or voted on. So you've said for 10 years, they have not. So, right, but what I'm saying is, what is different? How did I'm missing when you said now we will be voting, like we'll speak on May 6th and then be voting in November. How did that come about from the just voting on the committee for 10 years?
I'm not sure I completely understand.
I know I didn't.
But here's what I think I heard. This town is a very conservative town. This is a town who has an agricultural background. And at least in my time here, there was a time when people didn't even want to take grants. So Sheffield has come a long way. And part of it is the changing population of different people coming into town. Everyone who's ever been on a select board tries to do what they think is best for the town. That's their number one objective. And that also has changed. And I think we're just in a situation right now where the select board, and it was a 2-to-1 vote, so it wasn't unanimous even.
I'm really surprised. I started thinking about, well, what was the education of this for these people since 2019?
The time, I believe, is just right. But instead of necessarily blaming this all on the select board, no, and I didn't take it that way. It is very important for residents to bring forward what they think needs to be done. I'm going to mention the Green Communities Act, which failed at a town meeting. It's very important for citizens to bring forward what they also think needs select board attention. So Sheffield's a great place. It's my forever home. Sound like an adopted cat. But we have to work together, and we can't wait for 3 people to necessarily come to the same conclusion. as I hope will be the majority of our residents when they vote for this.
I just wanted to kind of address that idea of housing for a second. You know, there was a premise. You know, some of us were asked to serve by select boards on the school merger thing, and there was a premise. I sat through almost 100 of those meetings that our job was to manage the decline of these towns. And you guys rejected that and said we want to fight for these towns. And I just want to tell you that housing is going to be the critical answer to making sure that you keep your schools. I'm talking from a town. I went to grade school in Stockbridge, and we don't have one anymore. And we don't because our housing prices have gotten so expensive that the young people can't afford to live here. And that hasn't happened everywhere in the county yet. But this housing question is the number one question to answer if you're going to do what I think the voters overwhelmingly said you want to do, which is, yeah, we're going to fight for our schools. Make housing a top priority.
Yeah, like I said, part of the reason that I stood up in town meeting and said we need to do this was because I had children. This was 20 years ago that I had those children. I mean, I still have them, but you know, they now have children. At least one of them does. And 20 years ago, we were fighting the same fight, and we were having the same conversations, and we were saying our county is aging. Look around. Look at the color of the hair. And we don't have enough kids to go to our schools. We can't justify to ourselves at town meetings how much money it's going to cost us to renovate those schools. I am also a borner. I was born in Stockbridge. I went to school in Stockbridge. And I saw my town change. I was there for Norman Rockwell's stint as part of the town when he used to come in and sit in the town on the halls in the schools and look at the kids to see who he wanted as a model. He'd probably get arrested now. But you know, I think we want to preserve the things that make our towns, Berkshire County in particular, special. And part of that is the look of the town, the historic preservation. Part of that is preserving the function of the town, having kids, having schools. We need plumbers and electricians, and we need carpenters, and we need the people who can do the work, and we need them to be able to live here comfortably and have, and grow up and have the same feelings about our towns as we do. And community preservation may not be the total answer to that, but it certainly is part of the equation.
Well, I just wanted to say, Rene, and it's a little bit with this other. Close up to your mouth. Oh, the other lady. That I think it was 20 years ago, we have presented this CPA proposition to the town. And we had the land trust sponsored a group of people to talk about it. It had just come into an option for the towns. And we had a very hard time convincing the people, and obviously it didn't work. So it's wonderful that you have renewed that effort. But I think I agree with you very much that 1% is about what we could stand at this point. But it needs a lot of advertisement. It does, because the town has changed a lot, but they're still very conservative.
Let's get it
So,
passed.
yep.
Okay. I think we're probably going to have to come up a little bit. Sorry, Heidi.
I live on Hewan Street, and okay. Sheffield has an abundance of beautiful rural roads, and the Land Trust has done amazing things in preserving scenic corridors. My question is, can CPA funds be used to enhance the rural roads and promote recreational corridors? for bicycling, specifically bike lanes.
All right. We have another question. Oh, was that Chase? Okay.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mary Naylor. I grew up in Great Barrington, and I graduated from Monument Mountain Regional High School, second class to graduate. And I remember Norman Rockwell coming to my class when I was in like 5th or 6th grade, and I was so impressed. But when I turned 20, I left as fast as I could because I had other horizons. And I returned after 50 years, just recently, last year or two, and I chose Sheffield because of its rural look, its rural feel. And I was retiring here, but retirement was too slow for me. And so I got my Massachusetts real estate license. I'd been a real estate agent in Florida for 18 years. And I'm now a real estate agent, and I'm very, very happy to hear what's going on in this meeting tonight, because I agree. And I'm going to ask to talk with you and see what we can come up with, see what kind of plans we can come up with to try to expand what I've heard here today. And so I want to thank you so much for all the information that I've found so valuable. So thank you.
All right. Anybody else have a question?
Hi, Sally. Yum, yum. I am curious. Stockbridge has fulfilled their 10% affordable housing a long time ago, long before. You were probably the first in Berkshire County, I'm guessing. But I wonder, was any of that due to your early adoption of CPA?
So there's a couple things to remember about Stockbridge. First, to answer your direct question, CBC helped fund the second of well, there's really three places of significance for affordable housing in Stockbridge. There's Heaton Court that was funded in the 1980s. Jay Reinstad did that one. Then 70s, and then we've got Pine Woods, which is 32 units run by Construct, which was initially seed money funded with our CPC. In fact, that was one of the reasons we started CPC. But I want to. Then we have Riverbrook, which is a home for for some women with special needs that I think counts towards 24 units, which is a wonderful, wonderful place to live. It's right on Ice Glen Road. I just want to point out, though, I always point this out because, people say, oh, isn't Stockbridge so great? And Stockbridge is pretty great, don't get me wrong. But we're 60% second homeowners, at least. The count of housing is based on census population. So that means that you take 60% of the houses away, and that's 40% left, and you have to have 10% of those 40% of the homes. So guess what? Our numbers are kind of like, a little skewed from that because, and I'll just point out that kind of as you look at the cash purchases and all the things going on in Berkshire County, I live across the street from Tanglewood. I kind of consider that ground zero of if you want to go to a concert, you live near where I live, and that's where a lot of the houses got bought up is in that 1 or 2 mile radius of Tanglewood, which technically is in Stockbridge, believe it or not. And I just will point out that, we want to work hard to keep building housing because while we technically by an asterisk meet that 10% designation, if you were to build in, if you're factoring in every single house we have in Stockbridge, it's more like 5 or 6% or 4%. That's the reality.
Any other questions? Yeah. Yes, so we have one more here, and then we'll go to anybody on Zoom who has questions.
Thank you. Hi, thank you. I'm Michelle. I live here in Sheffield. And just with regard to the housing, is the vision for there to be new housing developed for new housing, or to have more places renovated and turned into new housing, affordable housing projects. Has there been any discussion about what the vision for how that would actually play out looks?
Well, within the last 2 years, we had a housing production plan adopted that was approved by the state. We have a housing commission, which Kathy Orlando is on, and I'm just trying to see if there's anybody else in the room. Sari Hoy is on also. Their plan is now, they were given in the housing production plan a series of steps to take. And they are, I believe, I'm not quite sure, but I've been told the final stages of putting that plan together, which will go to, they are a recommending board, not an implementation board, and that will go to the select board, I hope, within maybe the next 6 months. And then that plan will be shared with the public, comments will be made on it, and then it will be up to the public to help the select board decide how to proceed. I'm sorry? No. The housing production plan is independent of the CPA. If the CPA were adopted, one of the 4 categories that you can spend money on is affordable housing. So it would become a source of income and money that could be spent on affordable housing. So, in fact, it could be the primary source of money that would be spent and dedicated to affordable housing.
All right.
It's a gift that keeps on giving, too. What? It's a gift that keeps on giving. If you created affordable housing with CPA money, it then opens. If you create affordable housing using CPA money, it's then eligible to continue to support that, or support is the wrong word. You can still get money. You can get more money from the CPA for affordable housing.
All right. Any other questions in the room before we go to the Zoom audience? Okay, hold on. I'm just going to change the view here so I can see if anybody. All right, anybody on Zoom who has a question, you can either raise your hand or just unmute yourself and ask. All right, I am not seeing questions. All right, there was somebody who couldn't come who had a question for Stockbridge. So Sally and Patrick, there was in looking at the Community Preservation Coalition's website, it looked like Stockbridge had almost 100% match last year. Why is that?
We've been lucky enough to have 100% match a number of years because we have the 3%. So if you have the 3%, you get put into rounds of funding. So but we've always been really conservative as to how we budget our money, because you don't actually know how much money you have every year, which is very confusing. We have managed to give away more than $6 million over the course of the CPC, and I always say it's the best job in the entire world. When we have enough money to fund everything fully, which we have been lucky enough to do over the years. People come in and they have a worthy project, and we go, oh wow, this is cool, and we have the money, and we go, yeah, here it is. But it's sometimes it's a little bit complicated how that works.
But I just would point out that of that $6 million, easily $2 million of it came from the state. So once again, it just kind of whatever. It's like Rene was saying. It's like you're getting really good returns on your investment.
So it's because you're at the 3%, you're eligible for additional rounds of funding every year. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Yes. So that component, that's one of the slightly more complicated sections, but as I said, communities that have the full 3% surcharge, they are eligible for more than the base match. So as I explained last November, every community that had CPA received a base match, a minimum of 21% based on what they had collected at the local level. Communities with a 3% surcharge were eligible for more than the 21% base match. And that is calculated using a ranking system that the state has established, which takes a look at the size of the community and the affluence. There's a scale of 1 to 10 that kind of adjusts those values for the 3% communities. So Stockbridge, as pointed out, some years they've gotten 100% match. Last year, when the base match was 21%, Stockbridge, because they have that maximum surcharge, received a 55% match based on their local collections. So again, that's one of the risk reward parts of CPA is that you're much more likely to get folks to invest in this at a 1% level. We think that that's a great proposal for Sheffield, but if folks decide they want to go all in and maximize the bang for their buck from the state match, 3% communities do get additional funding beyond the base level.
Patrick, you look like you had something.
Yeah, I would just add that, and this isn't at all in us versus them, it's just an observation. Okay, like I said, about 60% of our homes are owned by seasonal residents, but they cover 80% of our tax base. And this has happened all over the county. It happened in Stockbridge first, but it's happened everywhere. So another way to look at this is that the local residents, the year-round residents who benefit from all of these things, pay $1 out of $5. And when you then think of CPC, it's not even just when you look at it that way, basically $1 in residential CPC contribution in Stockbridge is actually resulting in $7 or $8 of investment in the community for the actual full-time voting residents. And it's, you start to think of it as kind of how can we make, because typically the locals have more modest means. And I'm always thinking about ways we kind of make those local tax dollars go as far as possible. But this is one of those really good deals for a local taxpayer.
I might say that Beckett's on the opposite end. We voted 1.5%. We are only getting $13,000 this year from the state, which is significantly lower than we've ever had. The town probably raises $50,000 or $60,000 from it. So together, we might have $70,000 or $80,000 in the savings account activities. So that would be more where you would be rather than in that price income range, obviously. But that builds up. 2 years ago, we had no applications, so that money stays in the bank account and builds up. And this year, we have 2 possible proposals that we're looking at, and so there will be money to fund them. And so it's sitting there. It's a savings account that builds up, and it's a lot less than they get, but it's still, look at the things we've done.
Oh, another question?
Not so much a question as just an observation. I think that maybe you could. Wow. And I'm not even a quiet person. Okay, just an observation more, and maybe you have some other stories. But also the other good thing about CPA, so you're not only getting a great return on your investment, you can actually use that money then to leverage more money from other grants that are out there and available. And I've seen that happen in open space and rec projects, because that's more in the realm of what I work in. But say you've got 20 or 30,000 that you're using for an outdoor recreational work, and then you are still able to leverage 10-15,000 from DCR, Department of Conservation and Recreation, or something like that, which is just increasing more money to your town over and over again.
Every year, the organization that Chase is with does the numbers for the CPA communities, as well as those like Sheffield that may look at adopting it. I've got his latest for 23. We'll have new numbers for 24. But with the low and moderate income exemption, as well as the 100,000 exemption, in other words, all the exemptions that are eligible, at 1%, it looked at that we would probably that surcharge would bring in about $78,000 a year. The other thing that Chase has mentioned is that frequently when low to moderate income people and those who are exempted totally look at the amount that they would be charged, they pay it anyway because it's not a very significant amount of money. So, again, we'll have updated numbers, but at 78,000 with a match of about 20%, you can do the math, but that would bring in about 100 a year. 3%, which I think is a journey too far, would bring in about 234,000 plus a match. But so that kind of, we're not Stockbridge, but we're maybe a little better than Beckett at 1%. Okay, only on the CPA charge.
In a better position. Patrick, do you want the microphone?
Just throw one last comment. I looked at, before I came over, I looked at your town budget. Great job, by the way. I think that your total raise and appropriate from property taxes is around $10 million. Is that right, Rene? Yeah. So, I think so my point I'm making is 78 grand sounds like a lot, and it is to a lot of us, but on the scale of a $10 million budget from property taxes, it's a really reasonable amount for all the benefits you get.
All right, so we are now at 4:15. So I think we'd have to say thank you very much to all of our panelists.